And welcome into the latest edition of the Unpaid Interns. It's Wednesday, May 27th. Austin Render, joined by a new co-host today. Everyone has been clamoring, when is Connor Hines going to join? And you know what, folks? There he is right there. Connor Hines, my co-host today. Hines, how are you?
Well, it's good to see you. Even if it's not in person, Austin, good to see your face. I mean, I've loved the show so far, what you and Tamar and Griffin have been doing. It's been awesome. And I'm so excited to be a part of it. We've got a couple great guests on today. Really looking forward to some good talk all the way around.
Yeah, it'll be a great day. We have Zach Keefer joining us in just about 10 minutes. He'll be talking Colts in the NFL. Resumption in a couple of weeks. But Connor, before we get to our guests, let's do a little bit of chatting between you and myself here. We've got a very interesting sports period right now. Everyone's trying to come back. We have a lot of different approaches to it. The big one that's making news right now is the MLB because they're not getting any closer right now. Players, and right now it doesn't look like the MLB is anywhere close to a possible deal. What's going wrong with the MLB, and what do you feel like could be the best solution?
Yeah, I mean, with Major League Baseball right now, it's always been this case that, when you look at the top four, the big four in terms of the most, prominent professional sports leagues, Major League Baseball has always had an issue in terms of getting the players and the owners, the conflict between the MLB Players Association and the rest of the league, really, that's been a pretty continuous conflict. And there's been a lot of great reporting done on this lately. But I think in some respect, people are less hopeful about Major League Baseball actually getting restarted, or at least getting restarted in the foreseeable future, because these constant disagreements. I mean, obviously, MLB, one of the last sports without a salary cap, and players are, visibly frustrated with, the news now that, there might be significant salary cuts, and, call it stubborn, call it, prideful, whatever it may be. We've just kind of reached a stalemate with baseball right now. And I know, you got to call some Indiana baseball games this year. I, for one, am a huge Padres fan. I love baseball. I need baseball back in my life, but I don't know how promising it is right now with all of these, all of these ongoing discussions. It just seems like, it's easy to see that there's no end in sight right now. So I don't know. I mean, my guess is as good as yours or anybody else's at this point, but it does seem like, there are a few other leagues in a much better position to get back on the court, on the ice, what have you.
Yeah, the MLB feels, and if you want entertaining Twitter right now, Jeff Passan is fantastic. He's kind of he's nerding out on all of this prorated salary stuff and the disagreements between the two. And if you want to know kind of what's going on, he explains it in layman's terms. And I think he's been a great follow here the past couple of days. So the MLB might be a long way away. There are two, as you mentioned, Connor, two sports leagues that are a little bit closer to coming back. The NBA has agreed that it will go to Orlando. The question is, will the NA or will all 16 teams just from the playoffs go? Will there be 20 teams? Will all 30 teams from the league go? If you were if you were the president, Adam Silver, and you wanted to come up with something, a format of how the NBA could finish this season, how would you do it?
Well, it's funny, time and time again, we just, by default reference the NHL and the NBA together just because their seasons are almost, simultaneously happen. And I think the approach that the NHL is taking is the one that's going to work out the longest in the long run. Taking away those bottom 7 teams, but making sure everybody gets involved otherwise. And, people might not like this round robin format that they're utilizing right now, but you got to take the lesser of two evils at some point. And I could see the NBA mirroring, a similar situation, especially because you were so close to the playoffs. There are only a handful of games left in the NBA regular season. So I could see them taking a similar approach to what the NHL is doing. And, even with all of that said, you have to keep in mind this plan that the NHL put out is, not even straight up saying that hockey will be back. It is essentially the plan that will be in place if hockey comes back. So there's a lot of unknowns still, as there is with just about everything these days. But I could see the NBA taking a similar approach to what the NHL is doing. I mean, it might be a long-winded way to get to the finals, a long-winded way to get to what we know as playoff hockey or playoff basketball. But again, I mean, at a certain point, you got to do what you can and take the lesser of those two evils.
You're completely right. I think the NHL is an interesting thing because they have the format. They're just not sure when they're coming back or how they're coming back. The NBA feels like they kind of know how they're coming back. They don't know who's coming back yet. I think this is the time. If you're going to change things, now might be the time to try stuff. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is such a crazy time. The NBA has always kind of floated that idea. What if it was just a 16 team bracket? There weren't conferences. You eliminate the two sides, the East and the West, and you just go the best 16 teams. This feels like a great time to say, okay, let's take the top 8 teams from each conference and just put them in a 16 team bracket. Let's go.
Yep.
And I think this feels like the right time to do that. I think it'd be really fun to see the Bucks and the Lakers as the 1 and the 2 seeds. So if there's a time to try new things, I think now is the time. And the NHL is kind of showing that. They're like, you know what? We're not going to do our 16 team tournament. We're doing 24 teams. And we're going to give some other teams some shots because you know what? That seems like the easiest way to do it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes the most sense. Again, I mean, going back to what I just said, there's no easy way out of this right now. And I think the round robin, at least, I mean, you look at baseball's proposal right now, you'd have, a abbreviated spring training period to get athletes, comfortable and situated again. But again, baseball's in a completely different situation because the MLB season never even had the chance to get started. So I think that round robin with, the NHL's proposal, at least, is a rough equivalent to just giving the teams still in, contention a little bit of a buffer. I mean, you've got more games than you would in a regular, Stanley Cup playoffs year. But again, this year is far from normal anyway. So I think you got to give everybody a little bit of a buffer. It makes sense to, elongate the process a little bit. I think the NHL's proposal is the winning one. I really hope we get sports back as we all do in some capacity sooner rather than later. But yeah, we'll have to see. There's a lot of unknowns, but I do think the NHL could be a winning proposal for the time being.
If you had to pick a sport to come back, if they could all come back, it's
Oh,
the equal playing field. Which one would you want back first?
anything, man. I would say I would say baseball, though. I mean, you guys talked to Trisha Whitaker about this a couple weeks ago. I mean, there's something so nostalgic and just, I think she used the word romantic about just baseball and what that means to us. And how, at the beginning of all this, we talked about how baseball could be part of the path to healing with all of this, coronavirus stuff, because it has proven to be an example of healing and strength and resilience in the past for America. That would be awesome to get baseball back. But again, I'm sure you're in the same boat. we'll take what we can get right now.
Exactly. Well, it feels like baseball should be happening. It's May. That
Yeah.
feels like the easy one to get back. The NBA would be fun just because I think the NBA playoffs could be an interesting format. And who doesn't love the NHL playoffs? They're all great leagues. And of course, myself, I'd love to see golf back. We got a taste of it this past weekend. But there's one sport that hasn't had to worry about canceling or postponing yet, and that's the NFL. And in order to talk about the NFL, we're going to bring in the Athletics' Zach Keefer. He covers the Colts for the Athletic. He's also an adjunct professor at the IU Media School. I was lucky enough to be in his class this past semester. Zach, can you hear us?
I can. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. We can't see you right now.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for you to let me in.
Well, that's weird. Hold on. This is live TV, folks, right here. It's a good question. I don't know. I've never had this happen before.
I'm gonna.
Did you put in the password?
I never was asked.
Okay. Well, he's gone. He left us, Connor.
We're gonna get him
folks.
on.
Yeah, we're doing it. Live TV. We're gonna figure it out. Zach's gonna get in with us shortly, and if we have to, it's just gonna be his audio. Put him in the waiting room. Now I can bring him in. Wonder if my unstable internet has anything to do with this. Always a possibility.
It's life in the age of coronavirus.
Folks, hang with us. We have Zach Keefer coming. I promise. He's here. I just put him in the waiting room, and now it won't let him join back. But we are going to get him on this podcast to talk the NFL, because that is the one sport that is kind of on schedule, I guess you could say, right now.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot going on there.
Yeah, and Zach wrote about this recently. It's, it's the one sport that you can actually, somewhat, see a future in right now. It's not everything is happening as we speak, like it is in baseball. You have some planning time, and, Frank Reich and the Colts, I mean, they're planning for no fans. They're planning for, every sort of situation, and, trying to stay connected with a new group over Zoom. I mean, so many crazy situations in the NFL right now. I mean, you've got Joe Burrow like trying to learn a new playbook in Cincinnati over Zoom. So, nothing, less strange than the other leagues, but I think you could see more of a foreseeable, path to playing football this fall, just because it is still a few months away.
All right, Zach, can you hear us? We'll just go with that if you can still hear us. Oh, we might have lost him completely. Yeah. Well, we're going to keep talking about the NFL because we really want Zach Keefer to talk about the NFL. This is the first time you know what? I'm kind of impressed that we made it to the 5th episode before we had a technical error. Thank you, Zoom. We've done pretty good for the most part, but for the first time today, we are having a little bit of an issue here. Oh, wait, there's promise here. His name is now popped up. There's promise now. There he is.
Can you
Zach.
hear me?
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there, but we have you now, and that's all that matters. Zach Keefer from The Athletic joining us here on Unpaid Interns. Zach, how's it going? How's quarantine?
Good. How's your first couple weeks of summer been?
Oh, this show has been great. We're getting to talk to great people like you and learning more about the sports. Last week we hit the NBA, the MLB, and this week we're hitting the NFL and the NHL, PGA Tour. I guess your first thoughts on where the NFL is at. I know Connor is saying you've written about it, and it feels like the NFL is kind of on track in a way right now, as opposed to the NBA and the NHL who had to stop their seasons. Where's the NFL at right now in terms of off-season itinerary, and how is this virus going to affect things coming up?
I think from the people that I've talked to, there's a lot of quiet optimism, and obviously we have to be very, very careful with how optimistic we get, but it sounds like we're moving towards the very real possibility that there are NFL training camps in July and August, and they'll look different and they'll feel different, and they'll be different for people on my end as well in the media. But the NFL might be able to emerge from the pandemic largely unscathed in terms of missing time with, they held the NFL draft. They held it differently, but they were still able to do it. They had free agency. Unlike the NHL and Major League Baseball and the NBA, where their seasons were, very, very much altered, the NFL might be able to do this. They might not have fans in the fall, but it almost happened at the perfect time for them, if you can say that.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the NFL is the most fortunate maybe of all of the leagues. What about you mentioned free agency. I want to focus most of this on the Colts because that's kind of where you specialize with the Athletic. The Colts have made some moves in the free agency. Where are the Colts at right now? After free agency, after the draft, I know Greg Doyle is writing articles. He's super high on the Colts. Where are they at right now in your mind after all the offseason moves?
They're better. There's no doubt about that. They're better than they were the last time we saw them play when they got rolled in Jacksonville right at the turn of the new year. This is possibly the best roster they've had under Chris Ballard. Now that's only 4 years, but the head coach Frank Reich was sitting around on Memorial Day at night after I think dinner, and he was sitting there looking at his depth chart, and he said, "This is pretty good." And he was looking at all the moves they had made to get to where they are, and they were a lot of years of very, very prudent spending. They didn't go big in free agency on purpose so they could put themselves in a situation this year where they could do that. And they made 2 big signings. They made the trade for DeForest Buckner. They swapped the first-round pick to get him, then gave him a fat extension. And then they went out and paid Phillip Rivers $25 million for 1 year. And that's a gamble, and we won't see if that's going to pay off until the fall. But they had to get better at the quarterback spot, and they did. And let me tell you, they really like where they're at right now. They realize there's a long way to go. They have to have training camp. They have to go win it on the field. But there's not a lot of holes if you look across the roster. There's not a lot of areas that give you concern. And when you add one of the best young defensive tackles in the game in Buckner up front, and you get better at quarterback, and then you have the first 2 draft picks this team made in April, and Michael Pittman, the wide receiver, and Jonathan Taylor, the running back, there's a lot to like heading into 20. I think they're the best team in the AFC South. I'm not going to go further than that. But with Houston taking a step back, with Hopkins moving to Arizona, it's hard to think this team is a very credible contender in the division.
Well, you mentioned, Chris Ballard and the legacy that he's built so far. And you also mentioned gambling on Phil Rivers this year. Being a San Diego guy, I'm well accustomed to the ups and downs that is having Philip Rivers on your team. But in listening to one of your guys' recent podcasts, 1% Better, you talked a lot about the O-line and the way that Chris Ballard has really built his legacy as Colts GM so far off, building around that O-line. And frankly, O-line protection and support is something that Philip Rivers has not had a lot of his career with the Chargers. You mentioned, sort of banking. You mentioned on the podcast, sort of banking on, a 2018 type Phil Rivers performance where he had a, completion percentage of over 68%, 32 touchdowns. That was an awesome year for the Chargers, but, it's just as likely to see, the opposite from Philip Rivers as well. Is that a trust the process thing for the Colts right now?
Yeah, it was about them getting a little bit better at the quarterback spot. I mean, they like Brissett a lot more than most people, but they needed to get better in certain areas. And I think with Rivers, Frank Reich can run the offense he wants to run. And he didn't get to do that last year because they were vanilla and they were predictable and they leaned too much on the run. And it was boring. It was boring to watch. And those of you that watched it, you guys were bored. We were bored. And with Rivers, they can take some shots. They can get T.Y. Hilton involved on those double moves down the field. And with Rivers, they're banking on the 2018 version, not the 2019 version, but it's let's do what we do the best, and that's protect, right? They don't think they're going to have to make Rivers do all that much. And by that, I mean, even this is Reich. Reich went on the record and said he watched every throw this guy made last year, and he's confident the arm is not dipped at all. And he's also confident that if you don't make the guy throw the ball 35 times a game, he can still be a very, very good quarterback. They don't need him to be the MVP. They don't need 40 touchdowns from him. And if you go back and if you watch the 2018 season, the Colts season carefully, Andrew Luck was not a world beater that year. That's exactly what they want from Rivers. 214, 250 yards throwing every game, a couple touchdowns, complementing a running attack that can get triple digits every Sunday. And with Taylor and Marlon Mack, that's absolutely possible. So it all starts up front. That's the engine that's going to drive this team. Like you mentioned, that's the legacy Chris Ballard has built so far, but it's how they built this team. They built it inside out. So the first couple of years, they went all in on the offensive and defensive lines. And now you're seeing them start to add the pieces on the outside, the running backs, the wide receivers, now Rivers at quarterback. So They wanted to get the most important thing done right and done first. And they did that with the line. And they think that'll make Rivers that much better. Because, like you said, he hasn't had that in a long time in San Diego and LA.
Well, I think everyone's talking about Phillip Rivers. They might even be talking about the draft that the Colts had, 'cause I thought it was a pretty good draft overall. But I feel like the DeForest Buckner move is kind of sliding under the radar. Is that one of the most under the radar signings from the NFL free agency?
Yeah, for sure. Because it wasn't your typical free agent deal. It was a trade, right? So you didn't give up. You gave up the first round pick, and we talked to everyone about it. And Matt Eberflus, who runs the Colts defense as the coordinator, they came to him and said, "Would you be willing to give up the 13th pick for DeForest Buckner?" And he said he had two words: yes and yes. So if you want a sense of how impactful DeForest Buckner can be on a game, turn on the Super Bowl. I mean, the guy destroyed the Chiefs' offensive line. He was in the backfield harassing Patrick Mahomes, maybe the best player on the field for 3 quarters, maybe the best player on the field with a lot of good players for 3 quarters. Now, we know what happened at the end. We know Mahomes did what he did, and the Chiefs are Super Bowl champs. But Buckner addresses a need the Colts have long ignored and not been able to fill. They've never had a dominant three technique, not since the days of probably Baltimore. And I'm not exaggerating there. They've had some adequate guys. They've never had a bona fide Pro Bowler. And I think Buckner changes everything from the minute he gets there. It is one of the more underrated moves this offseason. And he's going to make Darius Leonard better. He's going to make Kenny Moore better. He's going to make everyone on that defense better.
The schedule itself is also intriguing for the Colts. I mean, you mentioned you think they're the top dog in the division right now. Do you think they're ready to challenge, the AFC top dogs like Kansas City and Baltimore? This is a really intriguing schedule for Indy. They've got, 2 appearances with, Cincinnati and Joe Burrow. There's a lot that the Colts could do with this schedule. I think it's favorable in a few different ways for them.
Yeah, I don't think they're there yet. I don't think they're there. And I don't think it's fair to put them in the same category as Baltimore and Kansas City. That's the cream of the crop in the AFC right now. With New England making the moves, they're not there anymore. We all know that. But I think it's a 2-dog race right now on paper, and that's why the season's fun, because we don't know how it'll play out. But I think Indy is very much a threat to make maybe a divisional round game this year. They're going to have to do it. The schedule is really interesting. If you look at it objectively, they should be 7-2, maybe 8-1. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but they've got so many winnable games early. And then they hit a really, really difficult stretch. I think they have Houston twice. They've got Tennessee in there. They've got Green Bay. They got Baltimore. So we could look at a little bit like last season when they went 5-2 to start, and then they just plodded home and fell apart in December. And I'm not saying that's going to happen again. But what I am saying is it's imperative for them to get out to a good start. When they have the cush part of the schedule, get out and get some wins early, get Rivers acclimated to the offense, and then you're going to see Lamar Jackson, you're going to see Aaron Rodgers, you're going to see the Titans, who whooped you the last time you played them last year. So it's interesting because the Colts could be one of those teams that sneak up on people 5-6 weeks in the season with a really good record, but it doesn't mean they're going to beat a lot of good teams. The real meat of the schedule is going to arrive in November.
That's a great point. Now, we've had a few sports writers on here on our show the past week and a half, and obviously it's a very different environment right now for you and your profession. How are you handling stories, interviews, being stuck at home, not being able to go to practice, not being able to see the people face to face? What's your approach with that?
Yeah, it's a challenge. There's no doubt. It's not the same. Anyone who tells you differently, I would disagree with wholeheartedly. Right now we'd be out watching the mini camps, the rookie mini camps. We'd get to watch the closest thing we would see to normal football until July. I mean, they would be putting the pads on in a couple of weeks for the June mini camps. And that's when you really start to see something. And we're not going to see that this year, barring anything unexpected. I prefer doing interviews in person. Allison, you heard me tell you guys this in class 1,000 times. It's a challenge. But you also need to deliver content, and you need to deliver good stuff. And I read a story last week about a Colts safety named Khari Willis who went through a very, very difficult personal struggle during his rookie year. And I would have much preferred to do this interview in person a couple of times. Didn't have that option, obviously. Had to do it over the phone. You make the best of it. It's not the same. But there's some great work being done out there, and it's not just the Athletic, but the Athletic has been doing such incredible stuff under the circumstances, especially the NBA coverage of The Last Dance and just trying to make the best of a bad situation. So I think it's going to all make us better, and I think it'll make us appreciate those one-on-one locker room interactions more because we might have taken them for granted now that we don't have that. I don't know what it's going to look like in the fall. It's definitely made our jobs harder, but I think we've done a good job at finding ways to get really good stories out there, as difficult as they are.
Well, we've heard a few sports writers tell us, and this is throughout, not just on this show, but you're not rooting for the team you're covering. But is it true that it is your job is just that much easier when they are winning and when everybody's happy and when they're willing to talk to you? Does that make your job easier?
Yeah, you can say that, but I would also counter with when it's a train wreck, it's really interesting and you can get some great material. And the bottom line is conflict is good for us and it's interesting. And, I had a team I covered that went 4-12 a couple years ago, and I thought I had one of my best seasons in terms of content because there was a lot going on and there was a lot of butting heads and there was a lot of interest. So I try to take the approach that what you don't want is 8-8. You don't want middle of the road, and you don't want predictable, and you don't want boring. You want 14-2. Yeah, that's great. You got the MVP at quarterback. You've got a Super Bowl run. Every Kansas City Chiefs reporter is sitting pretty right now for the next 5 to 6 years. We all know that. But I will counter that with it'd be interesting to be a Browns reporter the last 10 years because they've had about 45 head coaches and 38 different general managers, and it's never boring. That's what I fear the most on the beat. I don't want boring. I want interesting. The Colts have a chance to be both this year, both interesting and good, which is the best of both worlds. That was why 2018 was so fun, not because the Colts went from 1-5 to 10-6, but because you had Andrew Luck coming back from the shoulder, and you had Frank Reich starting with 5 losses in his first 6 games. And then you had Chris Ballard, who was, like 5-22 as a GM to start out. And then they got it going, and then they got it really going. Then they made the second round of the playoffs, and you never want boring. You always want interesting. And that's why 2018 was so fun. So we'll see what this season reveals.
And we know how awesome Lucas Oil Stadium is, but is there any, specific stadium, your specific trip you're looking forward to should the NFL happen this year? Any other favorite stadiums that you've gotten to go to and cover a game at?
Oh, that's easy. We get to go to Vegas this year and see the new stadium there. So, my wife always gets to go on like 1 or 2 trips a year. She did London a couple years ago. We've done LA. But if Vegas happens, and who knows with the safety and all that, and
Sure.
like that's, it's in December, so there's some time. But I think that's a trip she'll have to make. And we've done Seattle and all the good ones. But yeah, the AFC South doesn't exactly give us the best road cities. So when we get to branch out of the division, there's some good trips in there.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, Zach. I know we had a little technical difficulties there at the beginning, but thanks for forging through and giving your insight. Always enjoy talking to you.
No problem. Have a good one, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you too.
Zach.
All right, Heinz, a good interview there with Keefer. He gives us some good stuff. I mean, what are your thoughts on what you just heard from Zach?
Yeah, I mean, it's refreshing to hear that there's optimism right now for the NFL. And obviously, as we said, while we were trying to get Zach on before we even started talking to him, it makes sense why there is optimism because the NFL is such a ways away. At least, the regular season OTA is around the corner. But, either way, I think it's refreshing to hear that there's hope there. And even more so refreshing for Colts fans that regardless of who's on your roster, yes, it's a very much improved team coming into 2020, regardless of the circumstances around it. I mean, Frank Reich knows what he's doing at the helm. I mean, one of the most experienced guys in the league, having worked with Phillip Rivers previously. I think there are so many reasons to be really, really excited about not only the NFL. I mean, I'm super excited to watch the NFL for the first time in quite a few years, but also the Colts. I mean, it's going to be a really fun year up in Indy. So yeah, lots of things to look forward to in spite of, everything else that has been going on.
Well, you're in year 4 of being in Indiana, so I think you're finally in the Colts bandwagon.
Am I in the club?
We welcome you with open arms. Our next guest here, we're going to switch topics a little bit. He is a contributor for the Golf Channel Morning Drive. He's a writer for SB Nation, and he's also a co-host of a podcast called Shotgun Start. And I feel it's only right to start the podcast here with Brendan. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you guys doing? Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We're going to talk all things PGA Tour, the match, keep it light. I know that's how you and Andy always like it on the pod. I guess your first overall takeaway, we've had 3 days now to kind of take in the match and what it was all about. We've seen the overreactions, the underreactions on Twitter and all that stuff. What are your takeaways now you've had some time to maybe digest it?
My takeaway is, that generally speaking, it was a rousing success. I think there's perhaps, pitfalls in what you extrapolate and what you think is replicable for the future and looking at it, but just let's look at it in a vacuum. It was a rousing success. It was, extremely entertaining. It I think captured a wider bucket of fans, which is always this insecurity with golf, whether it's golf media, golfers themselves, the golf industry, about chasing some mythical fan that isn't already in, hardcore golf fan. That's always where my arguments always just focus on the good, loyal, solid group you have and try to add incrementally. But I think it was a blast. It was a hit. It didn't turn off the hardcore golf fans who sometimes get turned off by goofy different pursuits. But I think it was a hit all the way around. I think there will be some implications, learnings taken from it in future broadcasts. But again, I think there's also a little bit of a unicorn aspect here with you're not going to have two of the greatest quarterbacks of all time that are in the country's by far most popular sport. You're not going to have Tiger as like a draw in and of himself. That's not just, you can't replicate that ever by just putting the top 4 players in the world even, right? There's no Tiger effect. That's it. So, and it came during a sportsless pandemic. So of course it was a ratings bonanza, but that doesn't define its success either way. A lot of things were a lot of admirable attempts were made and I think came off successfully in tough conditions, whether they got low ratings or high ratings or whatever it was. So.
And we know it was, the highest rated cable golf event. I think what adds, you mentioned roping in the not your typical golf fans and why this was such a successful event, not only because we're craving sports right now, but I think personally, just watching it myself, it's the interesting factor. I mean, not only was nothing else on, but it blew up because it was interesting. You had quarterbacks on a golf course. You had guys mic'd up. I mean, golfers in general, when you talk about the PGA, are incredibly interesting people, yet sometimes golf kind of has trouble landing with a mass audience. Do you think, obviously taking everything as a grain of salt here,
yeah.
But I mean, what sort of lessons can be drawn from this in terms of just, even miking a few guys up and just making golf more of a spectacle, more of a, orchestrated event that you watch on TV?
Yeah, I think that's where we started to hit these real obstacles, and I wish there weren't any. Like, how do we apply some of what was done here to the actual crucibles of competition? Which this, admittedly, for super competitive people, but it's not the stakes of a PGA Tour event, certainly not a major championship, things like that. How do we bridge that gap between what's acceptable for lack of a better term, a silly season type event is what they would call it, and a PGA Tour event? I think the mic'd up thing is the instant sort of bell and whistle that people have gone to after this. And people have been calling that for years. Give us, you can censor it. You can have a delay. You can make sure no, proprietary info or whatever, or there's something that's embarrassing that's said. You can just we'll let you put that safety net in. But the golf addicts, and I think appealing to them first should be a first priority. The hardcore golf audience would love to hear more player caddy conversation about strategy, whatever it is, something that doesn't embarrass the player, embarrass the tour, which they're always cognizant about. And I think that improves your core product, right? It appeals to your core audience, and then let the core audience kind of go out and evangelize about why this is good and why this is attractive. You don't need to be a golf nut to really, have this appeal to you. So I think like just focusing on what your core product is, who these players are, what they do well, and where they excel, which is on the golf course, I think can have like sort of an expansive effect beyond just some golf nerds in the small corner of the world. So the mic'd up thing, I think, is an instant thing that could be applied. We've heard Phil, I think, today already talking about how he would be open to it. Is it going to happen at a major championship? Probably not. But just getting more of that, I think, is helpful, because often these broadcasts are highly qualified announcers, like guys who've been on tour and guys who've won, but they're also just kind of looking at the screen, trying to, guess or imply what may be happening. And I think the mic'd up players is certainly something that could be taken to a larger PGA Tour arena and improve that product. The other thing is just like maybe doing more of these kind of events, these matches where you bring in non-golf players and that capture a different bucket of audience. A big appeal of this was watching Tom Brady fall on his face. Like that was a huge part of that captured this Twitter conversation for a while Sunday. And yeah, that viewer might not be returning for whatever, the John Deere Classic or the FedEx Cup, but like, so what? It's still like a golf event, and don't worry about that. And so maybe there's an opportunity to do, Andy, my podcast host, is always like pining for these like Tuesday night matches, find the best courses, find a couple good players. Maybe now you add non-golf elements, whoever that is. So like, I think that gets into a dicey, whether it's PGA Tour or not. That's a separate track, I think, that should be explored more. Where here Phil's already kind of clearly putting the PGA Tour, like putting the pressure on them to allow more of these, because there's that whole independent contractor, but not quite, they have to approve it first thing. So Phil is clearly going to the media. You see this in the LA Times today, right? That's Phil going outside the tent saying we want to do more of these and putting pressure on Ponte Vedra. So like that's one track, doing more of these matches. The mic'd up thing is something that could happen on PGA Tour, in a month or whenever. So I think those are two immediate things I would love to see more of.
Yeah, I was going to even bring that up, but you beat me to it. The Phil Mickelson wanting it annually. Let's talk Tiger. I know everyone wanted to talk about how good he looked.
Yeah.
I know Andy kind of disagreed with all of those takes in a way, but what were your takeaways? Are we overreacting to the way Tiger hit the ball in a charity event in a rainy day?
No, I don't think you can overreact. I mean, seeing Tiger upright and hitting the ball well now is worth, an appropriate level of excitement. Right? I mean, I know he's the reigning Masters champion, but anything since like 2013 where you see him striping it, he's upright, he's healthy, is, worthy of some sort of cause for celebration. It's probably like a 80% go, he's not going all out on an event like this. But I think what I saw in his play is sort of emblematic of how when he first came back from the injury, it was like, I want to hit these ball speed numbers. I want to be keeping up with Brooks and Justin Thomas or whoever. And kind of as that first comeback season evolved, 2018, he started to be like, well, whatever. I don't need to. It doesn't need to be just about power numbers. And he's, Tiger has excelled because he's the smartest golfer maybe of all time, and he's the most strategic of all time. And just ripping it like that maybe wasn't the most strategic play. And what we saw as he evolved was hitting fewer drivers, maybe just trying to hit it 275, controlled fade, controlled cut, things like that. That got him around Augusta last year quite a bit. Rarely was he just going full bore with the driver. And I saw a lot of that on Sunday, just really a ton of low cuts, really controlled cuts. Those are wide fairways for him. Medalist has really wide fairways, but it wasn't that hard a challenge to hit them. But the ball flight seemed repetitive and consistent. These low cut, and super in control, which gave me an indication like he's ready. He's ready to come back. He's sort of also like strategically knows what kind of player he wants to be in his mid 40s now, and it's not necessarily being the longest guy on tour. It's I'm the best ball striker of all time. Keep the ball in the fairway and then rely on that skill. So that was encouraging. And I think just when he skipped the players, like I know it's not a major, but it's, it's a very significant event. That gave me cause for concern that it's more than just like, my back doesn't feel good right now, or I have a spasm. Like we've heard that over and over again. They don't have the benefit of the doubt, his agent and some of his PR team. They don't have the benefit of the doubt on that. So that gave me some concern, but he looked fine and perfect and upright and healthy. And just the style and strategy with which he played was encouraging.
And it's got to be another thing that you take with a grain of salt. I think it was Michael Wilbon talking about being hopeful about Tiger's future versus actually optimistic. And he was saying, essentially it's hard to be optimistic at this point because Tiger's just so old. I mean, the back and knee issues. I mean, Tiger was in shorts out there. You've got to take what was going on in the match. You got to extrapolate that a little bit. But for you personally, I mean, if you're a Tiger fan, does that make you any more hopeful about, what he's going to be able to do should this PGA season get going this summer?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It has to be encouraging based on where you were, whatever that was, March 15th or so, when he said he wasn't going to play the players. Like that was a big change. I could see him resting for Bay Hill, which he passed on last year. He rested, he didn't play WGC. But like not playing the players made it feel like this was some sort of lingering larger issue. And so I think seeing him play that way, a month, whatever we are, 2 months later after the withdrawing from the players, I think has to make you hopeful, to use your word, for the rest of the year, right? And Tiger is at the point in his career where skipping the players might be the most, logical way for him to proceed. Maybe it's doing a few of these matches, playing the majors, playing his own event at Riviera. PGA Tour isn't going to want to hear that, right? I mean, he's the cash cow, but like this just may be the best way for him to operate. And really, we're not just talking going from like 16 starts to 12. We're talking about going from like 15 to like 7, 8 events, maybe a year. Like really 4 majors, his own, and a couple, probably Memorial, Jack's event. So I think like maybe this, this layoff, it's a horrible situation for everyone in the world. Maybe there's like a side benefit for him in terms of being able to take a few months off, get himself in shape. And if we have a golf season, we have a major season coming around in the fall, he'll be in good shape for it. I would be hopeful. I think he fully knows what his body is capable of. He's going to try to get the most out of it while he can before maybe a back issue comes up again.
Well, let's talk about that schedule because it's different this year. The majors are going to be kind of bang, 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 bang. And as you guys joke, even after the FedEx Cup, so we're going to have a FedEx Cup champion without a major champion. But what's the weird, or how is someone like Tiger going to get himself ready for those majors? How is somebody internationally even going to get here for the majors? What are some of the hurdles that the PGA Tour is going to have to face here coming up?
Man, it's crazy. Like, and I think it's evolving so like differently and quickly. When this first started, I think we got the sense that the PGA was in the toughest spot because California seemed really locked down and like they were coming up first in August. It was like, man, PGA like preemptively jumping to August seems like now a bad move. Now we're looking at it here like a couple months later at the end of May saying they might be in the best spot where there's some kind of lull between waves and states seem to be opening up to sports again. Whereas the Masters might be in a hard spot late November, mid-November, when there's concerns about a second wave. So I think it's like really hard to peg where we'll be coming for that major season. Where are we going to be in August even? Where are we going to be certainly in September with potential Ryder Cup, the U.S. Open? PGA seems like it's in a good spot. The international thing is a real challenge. Like right now, the PGA Tour is requiring you to come for 14 days. You have to quarantine for 14 days. And like, that's a sensible regulation. But Lee Westwood's talked about this. Adam Scott's talked about this. Like flying from international to the US and then having to sit in a hotel room for 2 weeks. Like, what's the cost benefit of that? Not being able to practice, not being able to do anything. Like, does that make it worth it? Does that make it worth it to play what? A major? Does it make it worth it to play a regular PGA Tour event? Where are you? You're seeing some guys like Matt Fitzpatrick, I think, has already come over. He's going to quarantine in Florida. Rory McIlroy's caddy, Harry Diamond, has come over. I think he's going to quarantine in Rory's guest house, which is a luxury we don't all have. So I think there's going to be some major challenges with incorporating the international players, but it's kind of like, the Open Championship is canceled. So the world of golf is going to look maybe more like just the world of the PGA Tour for a while here, at least till, I don't know, September. And if you want to get in those majors, is it not fair? Does it seem equitable? Maybe not, but this is like a really rare and odd time. Maybe these guys, like, if you want to play the majors, get to America and you just are here through maybe the Masters. Not everyone's going to have that luxury, but it's certainly going to be, they're in the toughest spot for sure.
How was your job?
Oh, go ahead, Connor. Yeah.
How has your job changed at all during this time? I mean,
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, you're a podcaster. We're podcasters. You can podcast pretty much anywhere and everywhere. But I've got to imagine that, SB Nation, as a, more flexible multimedia based site, you've got to have a little more leeway in the sort of content that you can produce right now. And I got to imagine, I mean, we just talked to Zach about this as well. I got to imagine it's forcing you out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but what I've seen, like, I've tried to say this on the podcast, done a little bit with my editors. And I'm not trying to just be like Mr. Sunshine and Rainbows here, but like, in a way, I've tried to seize like the opportunity out of this. Like, I've taken it to like dive deep into a ton of like golf history, other weird random stories that I've like been on a list forever, like that I wouldn't be able to do if we were in the day-to-day, week-to-week rigors of a normal PGA Tour schedule and this hadn't happened. Like, does that mean I'm happy it happened? Of course not. Like, this isn't good for anyone, but like just trying to see the opportunities in that in the workplace of just really kind of making myself smarter, more educated on golf's history, different characters, different stories. I have a long list of stories and ideas that I'm not going to get 20% done with, right? Doing interviews, so like for me, it hasn't been like, oh my gosh, I have nothing to write about, talk about, and yap about, whether it's podcast and TV writing, but I've just tried to look at it as an opportunity. That doesn't mean, I want golf back. It's gonna be awesome when we get it back, but I think it's been a different opportunity to really spend time with some projects, spend time with some history and reading that you typically, you would not have had this not happened. So
who's your favorite athlete you've been able to do the deep dive into? You've done some pretty crazy ones here the past couple of weeks.
Athlete is a strong word, but Ian Woosnam's certainly one. Just because, the stories of him like riding on the handlebars of the bicycle to play in an event in Milan, stories of him getting in trouble for, having too much to drink, but like winning the Masters, being the son of a farmer in Wales and just becoming this big, strong driver of the golf ball at whatever he is, 5'4", because he was like baling hay all day. Like, Ian Woosnam's a definite, that's just the thing. Like, I'm much older than you guys, but a lot of these players were, you knew the names, knew what they accomplished, but you didn't know some of these specifics. And, we found our audience to be more into those than sort of the other like straight news or update kind of shows. So I think people are appreciating learning some color, and I don't know, it's a valuable exercise for me, just because next time I go to write about golf in present day, I'll have sort of some context of its history, different stories and players that I could relate or maybe bring up in my writing or discussions and things like that. So Woozy's definitely been an enjoyable one.
What's it been like working with Andy? How long have you guys been doing the podcast now? A couple of years?
September of 2018, I want to say. So coming up on 2 years, I guess. It's great. It's great. I mean, we were, pretty good friends in the industry before that. Like, we texted nonstop, and now this is like kind of an iteration of that in podcast form, right? And we both do it independently, so there's like a lot of ability to just, roam freely on there, where there's very few constraints. It's been like, it's exactly how we want it to be. The audience seems to appreciate that. Community that's been built up around it has been great. Andy's a genius. Like, he is a real, and don't tell him I said that, like, he's a real sort of has a skill set that very few people in the industry have right now, and an expertise that has fit at a perfect time and place. So he's not only like a golf course architecture savant, but a very accomplished player and knows the game and knows, and a former caddy and golf nut and watches the pros just like us. So he's a genius to have and an easy partner. Obviously, that's powers the show. So
awesome. Well, thanks. We'll let you go on that, but thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it, Brendan. Best of luck to you. Hopefully golf gets back going here June 11th, and we can all kind of watch it together. But thanks so much for joining us.
hey, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks, Brendan.
absolutely. Take care.
All right.
All right, Heinz, a pretty good episode today, I would say. We had some really nice guests, some really fun topics to talk about with Zach and Brendan. Your overall takeaways from your first episode of the Unpaid Interns?
I'm inspired. I'm encouraged about the future. I think, it's easy to come on and talk about sports and focus on the fact that we don't have anything right now. But I mean, we just had two guests on who are both approaching and utilizing this just dead period essentially in a couple very different ways, but I mean that's what it's all about at this point. I mean you and I both know that as well as anyone running the Hoosier Network. It's about getting outside the box a little bit. I know that's a cliche, but it really is. I mean you've got to make do with what you have at this time, and little things like the match, little things like the story Zach wrote about the Colts having hope for the NFL starting on time. That's what keeps us coming back for more. That's what keeps us hanging around right now. So I'm encouraged.
Sports are what keep us coming back. We need that. That was the best part of the golf match on Sunday Tom Brady holds out for eagle, and I like audibly got excited. And I haven't had that in so long, because you watch everything we're watching right now. Yeah. What happens because it's stuff from past tournaments and past events, and you're like, oh, I know IU wins this game, so I'm not gonna get excited. It's the suspense and the drama and the unpredictability of live sports that we all need back, and we need it back desperately.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, with this, taking the match specifically, I thought that was almost even like a good PR move for Tom Brady, because Tom Brady's Mr. Perfect on the football field all the time. And here he is, he goes out on live TV, TNT, and just shanks everything. I mean, it was just so self-deprecating, and it was the laugh that we all needed at the time. I mean, the interactions between Tom and Charles Barkley, of all people, who you choose to get paired up with. Was it our buddy Brian Anderson on the call?
It was BA. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, of all people, you get Chuck on with BA, who's an excellent broadcaster. And then you get the back and forth between Chuck and Tom and Peyton on the field. I mean, it was awesome. It was what we needed at the time. I'm really glad Brendan could deliver some more insight there. But yeah, I mean, you can only listen to sports talk for so long before you need an actual event to keep you coming back for more. So that was nice to see. But again, I mean, takeaways from today. I mean, the future is looking up, and obviously it's still uncertain with where we go from here. But if you can at least hang on to the hope that an NFL season will start on time, that, July workouts will start on time, that's good enough for me right now. But we do need it back.
Yeah, we just got to stay optimistic. I mean, hey, who knows? But I feel you with the sports talk. I mean, as soon as that match started or ended, I listened to like 3 podcasts, including Brendan's, about it. And it was nice to hear them talk about an actual event that happened. And I missed that. We're about 2 weeks away from golf starting. NASCAR's going. We're slowly but surely getting sports back. And I know that's something we're all looking forward to. You made the trek to Bloomington. How is it in B-Town? Does it feel weird being there?
It feels weird, but it also feels nice. It feels like, you're back home in a sense. I mean, that I personally, having never experienced a full Indiana summer, I'm going to I'm going to this year. And I don't really know what I'm in for yet, Austin, but we're going to a lot of
humidity,
a lot of heat, a lot of humidity. I'm going to find out soon enough. But I mean, it's awesome because this is the weather we get during the school year for, I don't know, maybe 4 weeks when we first get on campus, and then the weather turns pretty quick. So it's going to be a nice change to be here for a while. I'm glad to be back. Obviously it's different, much quieter. But they're doing some nice construction on Kirkwood. They're putting in some new, walking paths and stuff. It's it's going to be nice when fall comes around. But yeah, it is a little different for the time being, but you got to love Bloomington. It's good to be back.
Well, we are happy to at least give people something to watch, to listen to. No matter how you take in our content, it's always here on YouTube. We'll be live Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. Normally 11 o'clock. Today was a little different. Obviously, all these people that we talk to have busy schedules, and we got to coordinate all of that. But we will always go for 11 a.m. Eastern, Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the IU Sports Media YouTube page. We are also on Spreaker Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. So wherever you listen, and Spotify. So wherever you listen to your podcast, look up the Unpaid Interns. You'll have all of our episodes in full. We had some really good guests last week. We had some great ones so far this week. Friday, Connor, we have Tom Ackerman joining the show. St. Louis and IU's own Tom Ackerman will be joining us. Tomorrow and I will have that one for you on Friday. And then next week, we are doing a Student Appreciation Week. We will be talking to student media from Indiana University as they try and cover the crazy off seasons of IU sports from their homes around the country. So we will take a dive into student media next week and have some of our colleagues on the show to talk IU sports next week. So that's something to look forward to. Connor, any last words from your first episode?
No, this was awesome. Just give me more. I want to do more of these. This has been fun.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in again. Again, we'll be back on Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. We might start a few minutes early. I think Tom's schedule is just we got to shift a little bit forward. So we'll start about 10:50 on Friday. So check us out on the IU Sports Media YouTube page. And if you can't catch us live, we're always available wherever you listen to podcasts under Unpaid Interns. That'll wrap things up here for our Wednesday edition. For Connor, Zach, and Brendan, I'm Austin saying so long from Unpaid Interns.